Welcome to the Kitchen Table Finance Podcast.
Hey Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Doing well. We are coming up on the holiday season, and
Yeah.
I've got some of my shopping done, I think. So that's a win.
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
days out from Christmas. That's a win.
I should check with my daughter and see if my shopping is done yet.
Are you a last minute mall guy on Christmas Eve?
I have a personal shopper who helps me.
Oh, that's even better. Jealous.
Yeah, she loves to do it. She doesn't like to pay for it. So
Yeah.
it's win-win.
So, speaking of the holiday seasons, one of the things that we've noticed around here that ticks up usually around this time of year is fraud, identity theft, all that fun stuff seems to ramp up. We've gotten a few, clients reaching out because they got the vaunted letter of your information's been stolen. Here's what you can do kind of thing, which we have talked about before. But I wanted to kind of speak more towards what it means in retirement, some of the scams, the bigger scams for retirees to think about.
Right.
I actually pulled some information from the Federal Trade Commission that did a study, and I was actually shocked by this, but the most commonly targeted age group for fraudsters was actually people ages 30 to 39.
That really surprised me too. Yeah.
Not what I would have expected. But maybe that age group is just more likely to click on things. I don't know. But very, very, very close behind was the group of people that we're usually talking about right now, which is people aged 60 to 69, second most targeted group.
Yes.
And this is all information from 2022. So I don't have updated past that, but I'm sure it hasn't changed all that much.
Probably not.
And so the 60, like what we're seeing or what the Federal Trade Commission is seeing in terms of fraud in the 60 plus range is they're more likely to see fraud in tech support, prizes, sweepstakes, and lotteries, and family and friend imposters. And so those are like the three top ones that we see. We deal with these clients quite often, and tech support is one of the things that we help with. So it doesn't surprise me that someone could impersonate a tech person, right?
Right. Well, I get those emails that claim to be from Norton Antivirus, WebRoot. Some of those, like your virus protection is expired. Well, I've never even used your company. I'm not sure how it expired, but that doesn't surprise me. I've seen ones that purport to be from like the Best Buy Geek Squad, that sort of stuff. And again, I've never used those, so I just delete them. But I could totally, they're pretty convincing. They've stolen the logos. If you've used one of those services before, I can see at least giving it a thorough, well, boy, is this real?
For sure.
One that doesn't show up on this list too, and it kind of surprises me because I've heard from a couple clients and family members lately, is purporting to be from either Social Security or Medicare, saying you need to click on this link and verify information or your benefits are in jeopardy.
Yep.
Or
we've seen those. We've seen IRS stuff.
Or the flip side of it, not that your benefits are in jeopardy, but you may be eligible for things you're not claiming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Michigan is now doing such and such. And if you're Medicare, I've got,
Interestingly enough, in older adults, at least, the difference between, that 60 to 69 age group and 30 to 39 is the amount of money that we're seeing in losses, right? And so we're seeing $800 on average for people age 70 to 79 and $1,500 for ages 80 plus, which is a lot different than what we're seeing in the 30 to 39-year-old range. As far as how these scams are coming through, about 15% of them on social media, 24% on phone, 21% on web, 11 email. There's still some mail scams going on, so 10% there and 5% in text. So it's kind of all across the board as far as like how they're trying to get to you. And so, part of what I wanted to talk about today is like everybody knows those things are going on out there. And part of the hard part is it's not always as simple as like, hey, click on this link or send me money.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always like cut and dry. A lot of
Pretty
times they're
obvious.
just trying
Yeah.
to steal your identity, and you don't know exactly how or when they're going to use it. And
Right.
that's like the more scary, frustrating, keep me up at night part, right?
Yeah. 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 There's no immediate damage and you'll forget about it. And then 2 months later, find out somebody opened a credit card using that information or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So there's really three things that kind of come up on our radar as it relates to this. And the first one we kind of talked a little bit about in our headlines. We actually had a headline of people that were losing significant amounts of money, retirement money, by
Yeah.
investing into, fake schemes kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there is a resource for people on investor.gov about avoiding retirement fraud. And kind of like not necessarily taking this point by point from there, but certainly if it's something you're concerned about, check out the website. We'll put the link in the show notes. But I think the first thing it would kind of make sense is just to ask questions and check out
Mm-hmm.
the answers and do independent research, right?
Right.
So I think our article last week was, somebody that went to Ruth Chris and got a steak that ended up
Yeah.
costing them a couple $100,000 in losses.
Right. Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you ever find yourself in one of those rooms having a nice meal, make sure that you don't, you actually do some research, do some digging, find out
Yeah.
who this person is who's giving you the free meal, and make sure it's legitimate before you, start handing over information and money to them, right?
Yes. And if it sounds too good to be true, if anybody's promising you risk-free returns of any kind above, normal levels, look into it because and I would say some of these aren't necessarily scams.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not, you need to be aware of all the downsides too.
Right.
So even things
Yeah.
that wouldn't necessarily be flagged as fraudulent, it's
Right.
more about, understanding like if this particular insurance vehicle is promising me, no market downside, but, good returns, something is giving there, whether it's liquidity or costs or opportunity or, there's
Mm-hmm.
something there. So, um,
Yeah, and as it goes through in some of this, you can't judge a person's integrity by how they sound, and so a lot of
right,
people that are giving these dinners
right,
are really good salespeople, and that
right.
isn't
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they're bad people or doing bad things. It just means that you need to think about it. And one of the tactics that they use is pressure and making sure signing and rushing you into a decision. And that's the one thing we always say around here is like take your time, think it through.
hmm,
Don't act on emotions, just like let
right,
that process a little
right,
bit. And the
right,
one great thing about our job is there's no real investment emergencies. Nothing really has to happen like right now, right?
right, right.
A couple of days of thinking about it really isn't going to change your outcome in the long term.
Certainly shouldn't.
So certainly some things to think out. There are, those things going on out there that, like you said, there might be selling something legitimate, but it might not be the best thing for you. So just, do your
Hmm.
research, think it through. The next thing I wanted to talk about, Dave, was Social Security fraud and kind of what we're seeing on that front.
Hmm.
So, obviously there's a couple of, just things that you want to be aware of, right? One of the things, this is directly from ssa.gov. I'm talking about fraud. And the first thing that they recommend is not to carry your Social Security card around with
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
which, I don't even know. Do people have those anymore?
I
I
was just
think
gonna,
mine's
I was
buried
gonna, I
somewhere,
was
but
gonna say, I think mine is in the bottom of my lockbox safe somewhere,
yeah,
but yeah, I
right.
have not physically seen it in a long time because you shouldn't need it, and you're
Yeah.
better off not carrying it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And then, never say your Social Security number out loud in public. A lot of this is just kind of common sense type of
yeah,
stuff, but
yeah,
you never know who's around, right?
right,
But the other side of a lot of this as well, and so like we talked about earlier, some of these phishing scams that people are getting caught up in are to just do that, collect your Social Security number so
yeah,
that they can use it to impersonate you.
yeah,
Um, And I think, unfortunately for most people, our social security number has been out there or compromised at some point. It's really hard
Mm-hmm.
not to have it happen to you, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not on the internet at all, somebody that you
Right.
work with is putting that stuff out there. And so the likelihood of it being out there is pretty high.
Yeah. Yeah. I've said this before when we've talked about similar topics, but I just go through life assuming my information's out there and it's been
Right.
compromised, and I need to govern myself accordingly.
Yep.
Um, there were some interesting points on here about things you can do that I had not was not familiar with from Social Security.
Yeah. So one of the concerns of having your social security number out there as it relates to social security, especially if you're in this 60 to 70 year time frame, is if somebody has access to that information, it is possible for them to potentially make a claim on your social security
Right.
retirement and start having that money sent to them as opposed to you. And
Right.
or we've also seen it where you have social security coming, they hack into Social Security and change your bank account, and all of a sudden your Social Security retirement checks
It's going
are
somewhere
not going to
else.
you anymore, to your bank. They're
Right.
going to somebody else's bank, right?
Right.
And so that's like the big fear around Social Security retirement, Social Security payments. And so Social Security Administration has recognized this and actually put out some different things that you can do if you're worried about that, or if you're worried about your Social Security number
Mm-hmm.
being out there, which, like we said, for most people, it might just make sense as a preventative measure,
Yeah.
especially on some of this, just to have it done, right?
Yeah, this e-services block reminded me of when we had Ian Richardson on a couple years ago, our
Mm-hmm.
who at the time was our internal cybersecurity consultant here. And his point, I think, covers a lot of this stuff. Really, what you're usually doing is trading, like there's a spectrum with on one end convenience and on the other
Yep.
end security, right? And you
Yep.
have to decide where you want to be on that spectrum. You can
Yeah.
lock your credit, you can use e-services block through Social Security, so that and and maybe we didn't talk about this yet, but if you do that, now, if you want to make any changes, you have to march your butt down to the actual physical Social Security office to make
Right.
changes. You
Yep.
can't make changes online, but no one else can either.
Right.
So if you're likely to never have to change anything or do it rarely, and you're particularly worried about this sort of fraud, and that's your call, right?
Yep.
You just recognize, and it's the same conversation people often ask us about locking their credit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're not likely to be buying a new car, refinancing your mortgage or opening a credit card anytime soon, that's probably a good idea. But remember, you're going to have that little bit of inconvenience to make up for it
Right.
if you do need to
Yeah.
do any of those things.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, true story. My parents decided to lock their credit, and I kind of walked it through them, and then they called me in a panic one time because they couldn't get it unlocked because they wanted to do
No, yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So it is inconvenient, but it's
Yeah.
inconvenient on purpose. That's kind of the way you
Right.
want it, right?
Right. Right. If it's inconvenient for you, it's also inconvenient for the
Yeah.
fraudsters out there. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's two things that you can do to kind of protect your Social Security. Like we talked about, the e-service block, which is basically you can't do anything online anymore. You have to go to the local office. And then you can also put what's called a direct deposit fraud prevention block, which means that anyone, including yourself, can't enroll in direct deposit or change your address or direct deposit information online. They once you block that, you also have to go into the office to change your direct deposit. So, if you're concerned about it, those are certainly things you can do. Like you said, the convenience factor is, especially on the direct deposit side, that I can see of, like, if something happens to your bank and you have to change your bank account for some reason because somebody got in there, then
Hmm.
it's going to be a process, right? But most people don't change banks on a regular basis or change where their direct deposit's going. And so if it's something you're worried about, certainly it makes sense, right? Like if you haven't changed your bank in the last 20 years, you're probably not going to need to for a while. And so you can, if you're not planning on your payment needing to go somewhere else, then that's certainly an option that you can look at.
Yeah.
And so I think the first step too, which we kind of skipped by, is everybody should go to My Social Security. We'll put it in there and create a login with a secure password that you save somewhere. Hopefully, like a
Hmm.
random password, not one that you use in other places. because the sooner you do that, the more like you have control of that now, right? Like
Right.
nobody can create
You've
one for
claimed
you
it.
with your
Yeah.
information. You've claimed it, you've secured it. They probably have some sort of two-factor authentication. It's been a while since I've been in mine, but at a bare minimum, even if you haven't like gone
So,
through and done this yet, to start doing, or even if you're not getting payments yet, to actually have access to it is a good thing to do. Go ahead, Dave.
so yeah, true story. Preparing for this this call today, I went to log into my own and could not get in. so
There you have
I
it.
set the password particularly inconvenient for myself, and I started the process of retrieving it, and then
Yeah.
ran out of time. But
Yeah. Well, there you
so
have it.
yeah,
Keep your password somewhere safe, or make it hard. But yes,
well, or just
create
be
your
ready
Social
to
Security
reset
account
it.
as a
Yeah,
first step for sure.
yeah.
The next thing I wanted to talk about was IRS fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And so just thinking through like what can potentially happen there, because we have had clients, it seems like one every year or so,
Yeah,
that somebody has
yes.
filed a tax return for them and claimed a refund. And that really kind of messes things up, especially during a chaotic time of tax season, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so what happens there is somebody uses your social security number, fills in the tax return on your behalf before you get a chance to do it with made up numbers, which results in a refund that they then claim themselves. And then
Right.
you go ahead and file your taxes legitimately, and the IRS says, wait a minute, you already
Yeah.
did this.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So there's a couple ways that you can find out if you have potential tax related. You may get a letter from the IRS just
Hmm.
saying there's something suspicious going on, right? Or what's most common, what we find is you go to e-file and you can't because somebody's already filed or there's a duplicate
Right.
social security number. And so, or the IRS will also send tax transcripts occasionally. So if you get one in the mail that you didn't request, there's a couple different ways. We'll put these all in the show notes. Some things to keep in mind with the IRS specifically. They will not contact taxpayers by email, text, social media to request personal or financial information.
Right.
There's a lot of that going around. No, the IRS does not
Will
text
not do
and they
that.
do not send emails.
Yeah.
And they certainly are not on social media that I mean, I'm sure they are, but they're not contacting you via social media. Do you follow the IRS on social media, Dave? Somebody
Well,
must, right?
if I was on social media, I probably still wouldn't follow the IRS, but I probably should.
There you go. They will also never call you with a threat of a lawsuit or arrest.
Yeah.
And they will not call, email, or text you to request a taxpayer identity protection PIN. And
Yes.
so the best step for this, if you've had it happen, you've probably already had to do this already, and that is requesting or getting an identity protection PIN. And when I
Hmm.
actually started doing some research for this, I had thought that you could only do that if something happened, but you can actually
You
be
can do it.
proactive and set it up
Right.
beforehand.
Right. Right.
Yep. So if you're worried, if you get one of those alerts where your information's out there, you're not really sure how people are going to use it, maybe that first proactive step as it relates to the IRS is just to go and get a identity PIN from the IRS
Yes.
and start that process if it's something that you're worried about.
But also be aware, and I don't think this is a dissuasion, but just a heads up. I believe if you use a tax preparer then, and they're going to file on your behalf, e-file, you need to give them that PIN to file your taxes. So just be
Yeah.
ready for that.
Yep. And it's one of those things where it kind of depends on where you're at. And, if you are one of those people that like to file their taxes in January, it's probably not that big a deal. But if you're like the late person that gets it in on April 15th,
Yeah.
that just gives,
Yeah.
fraudsters more time
Well,
to beat you to the punch, right?
right. And particularly clients that have taxable accounts, all brokerage firms nowadays, if you've got a taxable account, your 1099 is going to come late in the cycle anyway. So be aware. You might want to take those steps.
Yeah, and it's like we talked about with the other ones, right? The convenience factor of now you have to have this PIN. It gets, I think they generate a new one every year, so you have to keep track of it and make sure if somebody's filing for you, they have it so that everything goes through. So it is somewhat inconvenient from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you got to weigh the options, right?
Right.
Security versus convenience.
Right. Right. And a little bit of inconvenience, the ounce of prevention versus the pound of cure
Right.
argument,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So,
So that's kind of what we see on the retirement side as far as fraud and potential fraud scams and some ideas to how to protect yourself about that. We've talked before, Dave, about the, identity theft on the other side as far as like credit freezes, things like that. I'll make sure we put a link in the show notes of those episodes. So if you
yeah,
need a refresher on that, because we've seen a lot of that come around.
I,
And I guess if nothing else, stay safe out there, right?
yeah, I long for the day when we no longer have to talk about this.
Yeah, it would be nice, but it seems like things are getting more complicated, not
No,
less. So we
that's
shall
such is
see.
the way of the world. All right.
We'll have to have Cole on one of these episodes to talk about the new fast processing computers that can, break encryption kind of thing, and what
Let's
we're
let's
seeing there.
let's just not. Let's just not. I don't want to
Fair
know.
enough. Fair
I don't
enough.
want to know.
Dave, as
All
always, been
right.
a pleasure, my friend. To
Thank
our
you, Nick.
listeners, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email at info@srbadvisors.com. We would love to hear from you. Thanks, Dave.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
This is a Zedia Media production.